palpations of the wrist and hand. So I'm going to go ahead and show this on my own hand because I think it's really good to palpate your own hand a lot and really learn the anatomical landmarks on your own hand, and then use that information to help you palpate other people's hands. So don't just practice on yours, practice on other people, but really get a good handle on your own wrist, and that will help you be able to get a good handle on everyone else's as well. So we really want to try our best to keep ourselves oriented and to describe things in anatomical positions with our hand facing upwards. If you're really good at identifying where you're at, whether you're on the palmar or dorsal side, you're going to be really good to go. So we're going to start out with the ulnar styloid process and the radius. So the ulnar styloid process is going to be on the ulnar side of the wrist here. It's really nicely palpable on the dorsal side, and it's actually very visible on the dorsal side on most people. It's this nice prominent bump here. If I am not in anatomical position, a lateral side, but if I am, it's on the medial side. The radial styloid process, same thing. Pretty nicely visible here from the dorsal side, but you can definitely palpate both of them with the hand palmar like this. When you're in the location of each of these, this is where your ulnar collateral ligament is going to be and your TFCC, and then also where your radial collateral ligament is going to be. Here in those divots before you get to the carpal bones. You'll be able to feel those nice ligamentous bands on either side, and they become more prominent if you radially and ulnarly deviate. So another important landmark that helps really start out, I think, being able to find different structures on the hand, especially the carpals, we have 8 of them, is Lister's tubercle. So remember, the radius is quite large at the wrist and the ulna is quite small. So the radius takes up a majority of the wrist. So you're going to find the styloid process, you're going to move laterally, if we're talking at the dorsal side here, until we feel our next prominent kind of little bony little tubercle. That's Lister's tubercle. And when we come straight up from there, it's going to be a little nice divot, and that's where your carpal bones are going to start. So that's the end of the radius, the beginning of the carpal bones. And right in that spot there, you want to stick your thumb and your finger on the opposite side. When you're palpating the carpal bones, really try to palpate them from both sides at the same time so you can get a real good handle on the bone. But right here in this little divot, if they flex and extend their wrist, you're going to be able to feel the lunate moving around in there. The lunate is crescent shaped, like a moon, why it's called the lunate. So that rounded portion of the bone is going to be the portion that's going to be popping up and down as you're doing this type of a motion. From there, and there's a nice picture of this in your lab manual, right above it is going to be your capitate, and that articulates with your third metacarpal bone, which is this one here. And so you're going to be able to really get your fingers in there, feel where that metacarpal ends, and that's where your capitate begins. And that's where that capitate and lunate and Lister's tubercle line up quite nicely. So that's a good orientation spot for you for the carpal bones. Then we know that depending on whether or not your hand is dorsal or palmar, the scaphoid is either lateral or medial. So the scaphoid is going to be located in the anatomical snuff box. So you can always have the person, extend their fingers and thumb and find that triangular divot there, stick your thumb right in the anatomical snuff box, and you know that your scaphoid is right below there. So then on either side, you should be able to palpate the scaphoid, and that's next to the lunate. On the other side, we have the nice prominent pisiform, which is that nice little rounded spot here on your wrist. So if you palpate the pisiform, you know that right underneath it is the triquetrum, and then next to that is your lunate. So you're going to have scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, pisiform. All right? Up from there is your hamate. And to really find the hamate, it's nice to find it on the palmar side because you just kind of dig around in that hypothenar eminence, and that's where you're going to find the hook of the hamate. It's a little bony prominence. It's also can be sometimes tender to touch. So just kind of stick your thumb in that hypothenar eminence until you find that bony landmark. That's your hook of the hamate. And then if you have your finger on the dorsal side, you're going to be able to grab a hold of that bone quite nicely. And that one articulates with mostly with the fifth metacarpal, but also the fourth as well. So you can feel those metacarpal heads moving around and articulating with the hamate, and that's how you know you're going to be in the right spot. Then we have the capitate, which we already found, but you can double check again, moving around that third metacarpal, and then also finding the lunate again. They're nicely aligned with each other. Then your trapezoid is going to be right underneath your second metacarpal bone. This one, on me anyways, is a little bit easy for me to find because I can really dig underneath that second metacarpal head on this side of my the dorsal side, right in here. I can feel that bone coming down, and then right underneath there, that's where my trapezoid is going to be. Trapezoid is a smaller carpal bone, so it's not as easy to palpate sometimes. So I like to find that second metacarpal and really try to find the articulation between the two. And then as you work your way over, the trapezium is going to be that unique joint that makes up the saddle joint with the first metacarpal bone. So find that first metacarpal as it articulates with the trapezium, which is right above your scaphoid, and that's how you're going to be able to locate that bone there. So those are the carpal bones. Really find a way for yourself to systematically go through and be able to find those using bony landmarks, and kind of really figuring out where they're at on your own hand. Keeping in mind to remember where you're at, dorsal, palmar, what you're looking at, what position you're in, to just make sure that you keep them oriented. And then it's really about remembering how each one of those bones are aligned with each other and what order they go in. Then for our metacarpals, those ones are pretty easy, nice and prominent ones to find. They're going to be the ones that if they make a fist, the heads are going to pop up right here, just like that. So it should make this nice formation where your first should be a little bit lower, your second should be the highest, then your third, then your fifth. Sorry. Second, third, fourth, fifth. I'm good at counting. So it should make this nice little peak. If they're more flat, that can sometimes be indicative of a fracture. So that's something to look at. If someone makes a fist, and especially the second one is dropped down and is more level, then they might have a metacarpal fracture. So these are the heads right there, very easy to find, very easy to grab onto, and you can translate them up and down, really get your fingers in there. You can actually feel the various muscles kind of in between there, the interossei. Those are your metacarpals. Your phalanges, you have 14. You have your proximal, middle, and distal phalanges. So that's true for each finger, except for the thumb, of course. We have our proximal and distal, just like at the big toe. Then we have our PIP and DIP joints. So PIP stands for proximal interphalangeal joint. So this one here, because this is our metacarpal phalangeal joint. This is our proximal interphalangeal joint. This is our distal interphalangeal joint. And that's the same for all 5 of these fingers. This will be your first metacarpal phalangeal joint. This will be your distal interphalangeal joint. So we only have 2 here. But remember that this one is metacarpal, just like these. Then at each one of those locations, you're going to have collateral ligaments. So at each side of your interproximal phalangeal joints, you're going to have your collateral ligaments, extensor hoods, volar plates are on the underside of those proximal